This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include Carolina Journal and John Locke Foundation's Becki Gray, John Hood from the John Locke Foundation, Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch, and former House Speaker Josephus Mavretic. We got a good and interesting show for you this week. Since Republicans are firmly in charge of state government and many local governments, we want to reflect on their vision and where it might lead us long term. We also want to look at the Treasurer's Investment Authority and ask whether it should be shared. And we need to talk about the Coastal Resource Commission's decision for a rolling 30-year prediction on sea level increases. And of course, as always, we ask our panel to tell us something we don't know. Let's get started. In 2010, Republicans took control of both houses of the legislature for the first time since Reconstruction. In 2012, they added enough seats to have veto-proof majorities. And with the election of a Republican governor, they're solidly in control of state government. Now, since 2011, the Republican majority has dramatically changed the direction of state government and passed some pretty controversial legislation. We want to ask all of our panelists. Republicans swept into office with a message that state government wasn't working, it had gotten too big, Democrats weren't attacking and solving problems, and we needed new leaders and a new direction. We're 3 years into this leadership. Tell us, Joe Mavretic, how well is it working? How are the Republicans doing?
Well, I think they're doing exactly what they said. And the proof of the pudding is the budget. The budget sets your priorities. And if you look at the budget passed by the Republicans for 2 assemblies, then clearly they have taken North Carolina in the direction of business and jobs as opposed to entitlements. And I think that anybody who didn't expect this didn't pay attention.
Chris, let's get your assessment.
Well,
where are we headed?
I completely disagree with that. I think we're headed toward a different kind of North Carolina. A lot of people say that Democrats ran it for 140 years. You know, Jesse Helms was a Democrat. Ronald Reagan was a Democrat. I mean, they were very conservative Democrats. This has been a conservative state, but we've never seen the likes of we're seeing now and the speed at which they're doing it. Everything from gutting the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, and then we see we have a big coal ash spill and everybody's panicked. We don't have enough inspectors, to making it more difficult to vote, and to cutting taxes on the wealthiest people in North Carolina and businesses, and cutting education at the same time. We don't have enough textbooks in many schools.
John, tell us how the Republicans are doing after 3 years.
They're achieving their main goal, which everybody understood, which was to make Chris Fitzsimon uncomfortable, unhappy. And they're doing that
unhappy
in an exemplary fashion. They made a significant change in the philosophy of how to improve North Carolina's standing in the world. The folks who criticized the Republicans seemed to be trapped about 20 years ago, and they assumed that everything was going fine until the Republicans got elected and screwed things up. And what was actually happening is, since the late 90s, North Carolina's economy was underperforming the national average. Our income growth was weak. Our job growth was often not good compared to the national average. They decided we needed a lower cost structure with government, with taxes and regulations, and changing the way we spend our transportation dollars and education dollars to get a better investment. So far, so good.
Becki.
I think they're doing exactly what they said they were going to do. This is what they were elected to do. This is how they got the supermajorities and got a Republican governor, because of the changes that were needed. And North Carolinians have expected this. Lower taxes, less burdensome regulations, different way of providing infrastructure, a focus on infrastructure. And as Joe said, a focus on jobs and the economy, getting people back to work and less dependent on government.
All right, I also want to ask all the panelists, what measures passed in the last 3 years do you think have had the biggest impact on our state? Chris, we'll start with you.
Well, I think I've mentioned a couple of them. Well, the tax cut, and then I actually think, to Becki's point, they achieved supermajorities with the most gerrymandered districts in the history of North Carolina because they're just better at it and have computers. The regulatory reform bill, we talk about creating jobs, and now we're all scrambling because we have coal ash leaking in 32 ponds and we don't know what to do with it.
Joe?
I think the thing that's going to the longest payoff is the biggest business in North Carolina is education, and I think the Republicans changed the education priorities. They went from having university, public schools, and community colleges to public schools, community colleges, and universities last, and I think that's healthy for North Carolina.
Becki?
I think that, well, several things. and really to Joe's point, the thing that I look to is the budget and the way they put the budget together and the priorities they set. And what they are doing, what we've seen, what they'll continue to see, is to define the role of government, which is limited, and to fund the priorities of the state, and to let North Carolina taxpayers, North Carolina businesses keep more of their money to spend it the way that they choose to spend it.
John?
Tom, tax and spend issues will always get the most attention in Raleigh, and they're the easiest to count up. But I really think the regulatory decisions have been more significant, at least in the short run, and maybe even in the long run. Remember, it isn't just a single bill or a single policy. There have been a number of bills passed. There's been tort reform, medical malpractice reform, and a fundamental change in the way we do rulemaking so that rules don't live forever. There's an automatic sunset process so that rules get reauthorized, reconsidered on a periodic basis. In the long run, that could affect the state more than any other decision.
We're talking around this table about the fact that Republicans want less government, less invasive government, smaller government, less costly investment in government, and yet the same group of people has gotten more intrusive in the issues of local government than any legislature has gotten in recent years. Why would you say that?
You know, it's their business. There's no such thing as self-rule in North Carolina, Tom. There's no such thing as a city that's not chartered by the state. There's no such thing as a county that's not chartered by the state. So the business of the state is the business of counties and municipalities.
All right. So what makes that ironic, though, is that when Republicans are in the minority, they often said, "Why are we making all these decisions in Raleigh? Let's let the local governments decide what's best in Whiteville and Asheville and Greenville." And now we're seeing a General Assembly that's saying you can't pass rules if you don't want fracking in your town. You can't set your own business privilege license fee, and on and on and on. So I mean, if they hadn't been talking for 20 years about let's have local control, and then they get into office and they want state control of local governments, I think that's what people are reacting to.
So in the time we've got left in this segment, where is all this headed? I mean, the polls show voters aren't happy with the direction the Republicans are leading our state. Are they upset enough to throw this bunch out? Or is this just more of what we've seen in years past?
This is what I call frictional interface. Whenever you have a significant change between Republican leadership, Democratic leadership, vice versa, has a frictional interface, and that's what we're seeing now.
And a lot of these policies are going to take a while to really see the effect, to really turn things around. And I think as people are going back to work, as they're getting jobs, as the economy is starting to improve, just this year with tax reform, North Carolinians are keeping more money from their paycheck or going into their pockets. They get to decide how to spend that money rather than sending it to government to grow.
They can't throw them out. The maps make it impossible this year to throw them out.
The key thing here is that the Fitzsimon-o-meter is still over really on the left. That's where the Republicans want to see it, and they're going to keep using that as their navigational guide.
All right. Remember NC Spin's now being aired on Time Warner cable outlets throughout the state. In Raleigh-Durham, we're still on WRAL and Fox 50 and on WITN in Washington. To learn the channel numbers and time for other Time Warner cable systems, consult the ncspin.com website, and you can watch us anytime you want on Time Warner On Demand or ncspin.com. We post each week's show on Friday, so view us anytime, and check us out at ncspin.com or ncspin on Facebook. When we come back after these messages, we're going to talk about the state pension investments.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
It's important for farmers and hunters to work together. Farmers own a majority of North Carolina hunting land, and besides, we're often hunters too. We share the same North Carolina values that we'll pass on to future generations. We share the desire to enjoy the land and our leisure time. Together, we can respect the land, our natural resources, and our privacy.
Every year, North Carolina patients undergo 635,000 same-day surgeries. 72% of these surgeries are performed in our highest-cost hospital facilities, adding as much as $2,000 to every procedure. The state's outdated Certificate of Need law prevents competition from lower-cost, higher-quality same-day surgery centers, inflating healthcare costs and limiting patient choice. Tell state lawmakers it's time to lower healthcare costs now. It's time to make a simple fix to an outdated law. increasing patient choice and lowering healthcare costs now. You can help. Visit reformconnow.com and tell lawmakers it's time for a simple fix to an outdated law. It's time to lower healthcare costs now.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
We now return to NC Spin.
The battle between State Treasurer Janet Cowell and the State Employees Association of North Carolina gets more interesting and embroiled, and it's all about who should invest state pension funds. Our Constitution gives sole responsibility for investment decisions to the Treasurer, but state employees says that's too much authority for the $86 billion now in the fund. A bipartisan commission appointed by Cowell recommended several reforms, including a recommendation that the Board of Trustees be appointed to help make these decisions. But Cowell backed away from the recommendation, saying more time and discussion was needed. Becki, what's your expectation with all of this? Are lawmakers going to take up this thorny issue in the short session or postpone it until next year or some later year?
I don't think they'll take it up. This is what we call a heavy lift, and this is a very serious matter. $86 billion is in that fund. This is the pension fund for all of the state employees, for the retiree. I mean, this is really serious business. And I know that the state employees are annoyed that Janet Cowell has complete authority over this, but we really haven't seen, that I'm aware of, any real problems with the fund. It's one of those things, you know, if it ain't broke, does it really need to be fixed? And I think that additional study needs to be done. We may see a study committee on this. What I'd be interested in is, what do they do in other states, and how are these things set up, and how we might adapt to best practices.
You've had the solution for this, and you've said it before on this program.
Listen, North Carolina's pension fund is one of the top 10 of the 50 states, and it's doing very well. And if you really want to go after it, go from defined contributions to go from defined benefits to defined contributions. Solves the problem.
John, let's just play what if here for a second. Let's say that we were going to appoint a board. All right, are we going to put people on that board who have experience making investments, in which case some of them are likely to have conflicts of interest or be subject to undue influence? Or are we going to be putting people on there who don't have any investment experience, in which case they are totally dependent on the investment advisors that Cowell and the Treasurer's office hires?
Tom, that's one of those questions. It's not really a question.
Yes,
it's more of an argument, and I'm just supposed to say, yeah, you're
exactly.
Right. Look, there's another aspect of this, too. So they put people on a board of trustees who have investment experience, which would be radically different from the current approach that the Treasurer uses, which involves hiring people who have investment experience. I mean, a lot of this just goes around and around and around in a circle. If we are concerned at all, I think Joe is correct. We need to be offering the 501 or 40. What am I trying to say?
It's a 401k
401k type of option. Right. But right now, the main issue we've got with the pension fund, in my opinion, is the cost structure. We've always had a very conservative portfolio that is a wise choice. We have a defined benefit system. If we want more risk to be taken, that needs to be something employees decide for themselves, and that is not something that we need to be moving.
And that comes through a defined contribution.
Yeah, we all want to do that.
We also. Let me just ask this question. So far as the Treasurer's office is concerned, she's asking the legislature to loosen the purse strings and let her hire more people. That one way to take away some of the risk and some of the problems with this is be able to put more investment advisors on and to be able to pay them market rates.
Well, and I think that's probably a good idea. I don't think it seems like there's almost a consensus around the table that if it's, as Becki mentioned, if there's not a huge problem, why would we be fixing it? If it's well managed, if the return is good, why are we even doing it? It's a separate question about whether you go to the defined benefit, defined contribution. The terms of the management and who makes a decision decisions. I have all the confidence in the world that Janet will seek the counsel that she needs.
But now that's see, just to give Scenic a little bit of a credit for their argument is that there have been periods where North Carolina's pension fund has not had as good a return as others, and they're right about that.
But the question is putting a board.
But they haven't taken the risk.
Exactly. Right. That's the fundamental question is, yes, you do give up rate of return sometimes to avoid downside risk, and that's what North Carolina's done.
One of the things that Janet Treasurer Cowell revealed was that, and we've talked about on this show, that there's like a $40 billion unfunded liability in the state health plan, and she just reported that it had been reduced by $10 billion. Is that because the state treasurer's office is doing a better job of administering or managing the state health plan, or employees just not making as many claims?
No, I think that's apples and oranges, and really not germane to this one, to this debate.
Well, it is from the standpoint that she also oversees the state health plan.
Yeah, and that's right, and we are not alone. All the other states are the same way.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. All right. When we come back after these messages, we're going to talk about sea level rises.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
It's a fact. Patients who receive care in the medical home from a trusted family physician reduce healthcare costs through prevention, early detection, and affordable management of high-cost chronic diseases.
Every dollar invested in healthcare matters. Let's invest them wisely, building on North Carolina's medical home model. Better health begins with a medical home, a trusted family physician, the best return on our healthcare investment. Learn about the importance of medical homes at ournchealthcare.com.
Where do you go when you need to know? ANC makes it easy for you to get the information you need to make well-informed public policy decisions. Our members are industry leaders who are ready to share their industry-specific insights with you. Want to hear both sides of the story? ANC members can tell you. Just use the ANC member directory as your guide or call us directly. ANC members have the knowledge, expertise, and perspective you need to create public policies that are good for North Carolina. We are ready for your call.
1 in 5 North Carolinians can't buy healthy foods in their communities, increasing their risk of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and some forms of cancer. Learn more at accesshealthyfoodsnc.org.
It takes every career to run an industry.
Real estate development.
Sales and operations.
Finances.
Graphic designers.
The ideas we develop here can transform an entire industry.
We are dedicated to hunger relief. We give roughly 35 million pounds a year.
People think of retail just in the very traditional sense of bricks and mortar. Hey, this isn't your dad's retail.
This is retail.
This is retail.
And this is retail.
Think you know retail? You may be surprised. Learn more at thisisretailnc.org.
We now return to NC Spin.
Back when Democrats ran state government and controlled most appointed boards, the Coastal Resources Commission warned of climate change effects and predicted a 39-inch rise in sea levels by the year 2100. Those involved in the coastal economy howled in protest over the possible impact such a prediction might have on their economy, and the 2012 legislature put a moratorium on any more CRC projections until 2016. Well, obviously snake-bitten, the CRC now has announced that in the future, forecasts will look no further out than 30 years and will likely show only a moderate sea level increase. Joe, I know you've got property along the coast. What's your reaction to what's going on with the Coastal Resources Commission?
On Wednesday, the 21st of May, Jay Penderzane wrote a column about this, which was the best analysis I've ever seen.
In the News and Observer?
Yeah, I wish that I had written it because he's right on target. I thought the CRC did a marvelous job of putting the oil on a nasty situation. A 30-year projection is extremely good. A 5-year rollover all the time gives everybody plenty of time to react to whatever happens, and it's based on some scientific data collected over time. I think it's a great move.
But most of us who have property along the coast will testify to the fact that water levels are in fact rising. There's no question about that. But during the GOP primary, Chris, you might remember there was a debate among
the candidates about climate change, and some of them denied it even existed. Is that the dominant feeling among the people that are running state government now?
Well, I think there is a lot of people running state government who believe that it's not changing. Then there's another group of people who acknowledge it's changing and are trying to figure out what or have a disagreement about what the cause is. We've talked before on the show about Orrin Pilkey. His protege now is a guy named Rob Young, who was sort of taken up the gauntlet, who was a strong supporter of at least something closer to the original finding of the Coastal Commission. And 30 years sounds like a long time, but think about the impact if we're wrong. Think about when you literally build developments in communities and wastewater treatment plants and all these things. 30 years is not a long time in the life of a city or life of a community, which is why I'm still a little worried about this compromise plan.
But Becki, we can understand the people who make their living down on the coast, resort type people, real estate people,
fishermen,
that kind of thing, getting a little spooked by some of these projections, because the reality of the situation is we don't know what the sea level rise.
I think that's exactly the point. Yeah, we don't know. And, you know, the climate changes. Of course the climate changes. Does human activity, is there anything we can do about it? I mean, if you live in North Carolina, you know that the climate changes. But the question is, you know, what can and should we do? At what cost? You know, can we regulate the climate?
It is a really very basic technical issue, which is that when you go all the way out to 2100, there was not a prediction. There was a huge range of predictions, and they just chose the midpoint. There was simply too much uncertainty to ever get to take seriously as a policy-making instrument. 30 years is something you can get most people to agree on what that much narrower range means. That was a reasonable solution to the problem.
We'll see whether or not that can happen in 2016 when they make their next projection. After these messages, we're going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
Does your North Carolina business or organization have a story to tell? I'm Richard Campbell, and at Carolina Broadcasting and Publishing, we help tell stories that connect you to the people who will respond. We take the time to understand our clients' needs and what makes them unique. We craft their stories through the efficient use of words, images, and videos that resonate with their desired audience. We also know that a good story is incomplete without a call to action. On video, on air, online, and in print, from concept to final production, no one can help tell your story more effectively or affordably than we can. For special introductory offers, visit carolinabroadcasting.com or call 919-832-1416. Again, that's carolinabroadcasting.com. Let us help tell your story today.
If CON laws were reformed and we had more choice and control to help our patients arrive at a better outcome faster, that's the goal for everybody. And having more choices, it invariably would provide quicker access, control of the quality of images, which is a big difficulty. And most importantly, being able to have competition for price controlling ultimately translates to less dollars by the patient. I am Dr. Sean Hawker, and I support Certificate of Need reform.
I'm Linda Loveland. Join me for a special screening of Farmland, a documentary that takes us inside the lives of 6 young farmers and ranchers. It's an eye-opening look into their high-risk jobs and their passion for a way of life passed down for generations, but is constantly evolving. This special screening of Farmland will be June 12th at the Carolina Theater in Durham. $5 from every ticket will help feed hungry neighbors. Get your tickets now at feedthedialoguenc.com.
Well, here we are, our favorite time of the show. We asked the panel to tell us something we don't know. Chris Fitzsimon.
One of the reasons a lot of people are concerned about the explosion in charter schools is that the state still has no mechanism, no accountability. There's a charter school in Winston-Salem. Recently, the basketball coach paid by the taxpayers was scouting foreign players to bring to North Carolina, a charter school in Winston-Salem named QEA. The state's known about it. It's investigating. We're paying for a high school basketball factory.
You got a problem with that?
Well, and it's outrageous that it's happening.
Joe, tell us something we don't know.
It's a chap named Will Collins over in the Commerce Department that's involved with worker skill training, fixing broken government. Here's a comparison. In 2012, under the Perdue administration, there were 16 firms involved with 240 people, got about $170,000 in federal dollars. In 2013, there were 78 firms, 1,900 workers, and over $1 million in return. They're fixing broken government.
Becki, tell us something we don't know.
Since the early 1980s, 79 counties and over 100 municipalities have asked the General Assembly for authorization to impose occupancy taxes in their communities. We have even half a dozen new requests this General Assembly session, and that money is used for a variety of things, and that's one of those where I think that we need additional transparency in how that money is being spent, where it's going, what it's been used for, and if it's paying off.
And there's a big issue up in Haywood County about that right now. John, tell us something we don't know.
Tom, health care reform has always been controversial. People made statements pro or con. We won't be able to resolve that in the few seconds remaining. One of the strangest claims that was made is if we expanded Medicaid coverage, it would reduce the use of emergency rooms, which was never true. It's never been true in the past. And now in the first quarter under the new Medicaid expansions under Obamacare, in some states, Medicare ER usage is up 40%. You don't reduce emergency room usage by giving people insurance coverage. That's not one of the outcomes.
Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback, and read our weekly column, visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. And we hope you'll join us next week when NC Spin is going to talk about the revision in the state budget and what's going to happen in the General Assembly. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.